take a look at President Lyndon Johnson speaking at Howard University in 1965.
Oh, yes.
But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want and do as you desire and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair.
It's pathetic. It's not a question of, there's no you who has the control to be completely fair or completely unfair. I mean, the circumstances are, so someone once criticized the mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair. And I think it was David Reisman who said, the tests are not unfair. Life is unfair, and the tests are measuring the results. But who has control of life? Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
So Lyndon Johnson, in fact, although good liberal that he was, at least in regard, Lyndon Johnson had a complicated career and changed positions on issues many times, but good liberal though he was at that moment, he was in fact engaging in a breathtaking arrogance.
Yes.
On two counts. One, that white people were the ones who were responsible for where black people stood in the race, that it was up to whites entirely.
Meaning that it's in the hands of white Americans to decide how far in front or how far in the back that blacks are positioned in the race. The blacks themselves have no control in the matter whatsoever.
The blacks, as he described,
devastating.
Black people are passive; they're acted upon.
That's right. That's right.
He said as if the blacks are passive and are acted upon. Now, what does that mean? That means that they can't better themselves or better their condition by their own internal efforts, and essentially they just sit there stagnant and motionless or doing nothing until an external or an outside force acts upon them to make them do something, right? And the external force in this instance is the white people, right? The white Americans. And for many black Americans, they really believe this to be true, right? They believe that everything is really out of their control and it's really up to white Americans to change their lives, right? And I see this in the comments many times when people refuse to take responsibility for anything at all that they do, right? They have surrendered all of their power over to white people, right? To whereas the whites to them are as gods, right? Controlling their fate and controlling their destiny. And to those that are coming from the black American community who do not think like this, right? Those are the people that you have to get away from. And those are the types of people you have to stop identifying with, because what they're going to do is they're going to drag you down and they're going to drag your generations down all the way down into the pit with this type of thinking. And there's way more of them than there are of you.
And then the second act of arrogance is the supposition that somehow the federal government could fix it.
Yes. It is staggering. But if you wanted to be charitable, you could say, well, he said this in 1965. But if you say, all right, why are people now repeating it in 2013 when we've had nearly half a century of experience to the contrary?
And even still in 2024, and it'll still be so in the year 2100 and beyond, because the people with these mindsets and these ideas, they have children, and those children, they learn these ideas from their parents. And those children learn to look for everything out in society to support those ideas, right? And that's what keeps the cycle going. And you have to understand that if you look hard enough for anything, you could find it, right? That's anything. If people want to look to find reasons to support the idea of the white man holding them down and holding them back, right? They could find that. And on the contrary, if people want to look for all the reasons to support the idea that today people here in America with any skin color can change their lives and they can make something of it, then they can find that as well, right? Either one of them they could find. And what it boils down to is, what outcome does each of these ideas produce? What is the outcome of thinking that white people have all the power and all the control over your life? It makes people helpless. It makes people anxious. It makes people motivated to do very little and to always blame and complain, right? That's the outcome of that. And what's the outcome of thinking that you have power within yourself to do something to better yourself and to better your life? It makes people feel more confident. It makes people feel more optimistic. It makes people more responsible, and it makes people more motivated to take the necessary actions to actually change their lives, right? So what outcome are you actually looking for? That's the question for people living today. Many people secretly want to live a life of blaming and complaining, and they really don't want to do anything to change that whatsoever. And one thing that I've learned to do is I've learned to spot these people out quickly, right? As quick as possible. And one thing that I refuse to do is to teach people to go through life believing those types of ideas.
And if you look within the black community, those blacks who had escaped what I call the black redneck culture, they've moved on. So, but it's the culture the different parts of the black community had. They were different.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, in his famous 1965 report entitled "The Negro Family: The Case for National Action," close quote. Longish quotation, but it gets to something, I believe. Moynihan: the fundamental problem is that of family structure. The Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. A middle class has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled and poorly educated, the fabric of conventional social relationships has all but disintegrated. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. Close quote. When Moynihan wrote those words, the illegitimacy rate among African Americans was 25%. Today, the illegitimacy rate among white Americans is 36%. Among Hispanics, more than 50%, and among African Americans, more than 70%.
Yes.
Aside from throwing up your hands in despair, what is to be done?
The first thing to be done is to understand that this was a result of policies begun in the 1960s. This is not a legacy of what happened 100 years before the 1960s.
The breakdown of the black family is not a legacy of slavery.
No. If you the classic study of this goes all the way back to the era of slavery, and they find that most black kids, even under slavery, had lived with two parents, and that was true all the way up until the 1960s. And so, if you really want to find out what's changed, it has changed since the 1960s. And the fact that whites now have a higher rate of illegitimacy than blacks had when Moynihan wrote suggests that this is something that spreads out. But if you look at something else, if you look at those blacks, look at black husband-wife families, the poverty rate among such families has been in single digits every year since 1994. And so if you look at the external causes, why the husband and wife families and the welfare single mom families all are facing the same society and objective things, but the results are radically different because the cultures and values are different.
So you would roll back welfare. I guess that's the principal policy. So what would Tom Sowell do? One, you'd eliminate welfare, you'd reform welfare. What would you do?
Roll it back.
All right. And what about affirmative action?
Eliminate it.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Colorblind
Yeah.
policy completely. All right. What prospect for that do you see?
None.
No
At
black,
present.
no black leader of any standing. I'm talking about a political leader as opposed to an intellectual such
Right.
as yourself. You've got, there's you, there's Walter Williams. Do you get the sense that there's a growing generation, a rising generation of African American intellectuals who say, enough of this, I'm with Tom Sowell?
Well, I don't know if they'll go that far. There's no point.
That would be asking a lot.
There's no point being reckless. But I think there are people like Shelby Steele and many others, Larry Elder. You can run through a long list, and there are more such people now than there were, say, in the 1970s. But in terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for black leaders to blame all problems in the black community on the larger society.
Did you hear that? All the incentives, or in other words, where all the money is at for the black political leaders, is in the business of blaming all the problems in the black community on everyone else, which produces the outcome that we talked about earlier: the fear, hopelessness, anxiety, right? All these types of problems. But who cares? This is where the money's at for them. And we know that people, no matter what skin color they have, are willing to do many types of things, even if it goes against the interests of the people that they serve, to make money, right? They will steal, they'll deal drugs to people, they'll rob people, they'll kill people, and they'll sell people a narrative that keeps them in the pit. Understand?
And that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group. That there's no point. I mean, why would you, if you believe what they say, why would you want to knock yourself out in the school knowing that the man is not going to let you get anywhere? Well, one of the most pathetic things I heard in recent years was a young black man saying that, at one point he thought he would join the Air Force and become a pilot. And then he says he realized that the white man is not going to let a black man become a pilot. And he was saying this decades after the Tennessee Airmen had established their reputation in combat in Europe. But the hopelessness is one of the big products of the race industry. That you have no chance. I remember giving a talk at Marquette, and at the end of the talk, among the questions that was asked, a young black man got up and he said, "Even though I am graduating from Marquette University, what hope is there for me?" And having gone through college when I was in the 50s, I don't remember any blacks saying that in the 1950s, when there was a lot more obstacles to overcome than there were when this guy is graduating from Marquette.
To have so many people living today complaining about the white man holding them back, it's almost like a spit in the face to the people who really did have major obstacles to overcome, right? It really is. And as I've said before, I don't fault the older generation for having these types of views if they do have them. They lived in a completely different time than the time that I lived through, right? And even still, there are people from that older generation, like Dr. Thomas Sowell, who don't have that type of worldview, right? And there's a lot of things to learn from these types of people, right? There really is. But if you're a millennial or someone who's coming from a younger generation, there's really no good to have these type of thoughts and thinking that you have no chance in life today. If the real reason is that you just don't want to apply yourself, then just say that, right? Just say that. That honesty would be much more respectable than lying about it.
But you have to produce that kind of feeling in order to serve the interests of those in the race industry.
What feeling? He's talking about producing the feeling of hopelessness within the black community. And this is what it is that sustains the race industry, and it keeps the pockets fat of the black and the white politicians who perpetuate this type of message. So the black community, they lose because this message here, it keeps them stuck and it keeps them in a mode of fear and a mode of doing nothing, right? But the politicians, they win because they capitalize off of it and they make money from it, right? And this is not something that's new either. This is something that was happening during the time of Booker T. Washington, where you had people capitalizing off of the plight of the people who identify themselves as black people. And it is reasons like this and a whole bunch more that led us to the conclusion that the only way to save the future generation was to leave the black community and to start fresh with the right people who have the right mind and who have the right heart. And that's really all that's left.
Final question then. Maybe we can think in terms of that young man at Marquette. Or let's put it this way. Somewhere watching this interview, there's a young Thomas Sowell. There's an African American who's smart and wants to do something with his life. It seems to me we've already got one piece of advice you'd offer to him is stay away from the races industry. Stay away from the race hustlers. What advice would you give a young Thomas Sowell? How do you make something of yourself as an African American in America today?
The way anybody else would. You equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay for.
A whole lot of people don't want to hear that very simple message, but there are a few who do, and that's what this channel is for. It's to help you climb out of the pit that many people want to keep you down in so you can get into the free world where life is much better and it makes more sense. And so I want to thank you for watching all the way into the end. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.